Miss Jasper. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Miss Merrill. How are you?
Good. I'm doing really well. So I understand you want to go over Sophie's National Test of Achievement that she took a couple weeks ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. So this this section up here, it just basically just tells us the demographics of the student and where it was taken. So it goes over the teacher's name, school, student's name, and the day the test was taken.
Okay.
Sorry. So basically, this is just teacher information, not so much for your use, but for ours. Okay, so this top table we have is what we call our norm reference table, and our bottom is our criterion reference table. So I know they're little big words, but I'm going to go over all of that in our meeting today. So let's start with the top section. So this is the norm reference table. So a norm reference compares Sophie's scores to a set of scores that were taken basically before the test was given to us as teachers. So a group of students took it, and we base our scores off of those group of students that had taken it beforehand. So this section is broken into topics and then there's subtests. So for example, reading, it's broken down into vocabulary and word analysis through there.
Okay. So if I'm reading this correctly, the subtests for math would be math concepts, problem solving, and procedures.
Yes, absolutely. Just like that.
Okay, perfect. And now what does basic battery and complete battery mean?
Okay, yeah, good question. That's something that most of our parents don't really understand. It is
confused.
Very worded kind of weirdly. So basic battery basically just incorporates all of her core subjects such as reading, math, language, listening, and spelling. So those are just, if we were to only look at those as like a school district or a campus-wide, those are the main subjects that we focus on in early childhood, so basically kinder through third grade. Complete battery also incorporates those plus science and social studies. So science and social studies are a little bit more of our difficult topics, and we talk about those later in later grade schools and even elementary and even middle school. So we kind of separate those just to look at the differentiation between the both of those. So
okay, makes sense.
Yeah, no problem. So next thing we're going to go over is this number of items and raw score. So the number of items is basically how many items were given on the test for the topic. So for reading, there was 108 questions, and her raw score was 83. So she got 83 out of the 108 correct. So she did very well on that. So next column is national percentiles. So you look at this and you see 5,300 percentiles. That looks a little bit nerve-wracking for you. You think she scored 53%. So percentile, that's not what that means. Basically, Sophie scored in the 53rd percentile of students out of the norm group of students. So she scored better than 53% of the students who took the test prior to her in our norm group. So for example, looking at our bell curve right here, we can see under percentile equivalence that 50% is our middle range, right? That she's scoring at more than 50%, which is the average of the students. So for her total reading, she scored 53rd. So she's right above average in the 50th percentile. So she's doing really well with her total reading scores and all of that. So there's nothing to be worried about that at all. So now let's look over to percentile bands. So basically, we know that no test is perfect. There's always some margin of error, whether the students be hungry or cold or had a rough morning to start with before the test, anxiety even. So basically that just gives us a little margin of error that if the student was to take the test again, that she would score within 2 points less or 2 points higher than that. So it just gives us a little bit. So for example, in reading, she scored 53. So she could have either scored, she takes it again in between 51 and 55 percentile above the students. So,
well, then for just making sure, for science, what would Sophie's percentile and percentile band be?
Okay, so for science, her percentile is the 85th percentile. So she's doing really well in science, and which doesn't surprise me at all. Sophie's really taken to all the science topics we've been talking about in class. I have in her portfolio right here, actually. We've been talking about the moon phases, and Sophie's loved the moon phases in class. We did a little science experiment with them, and we did Oreos, and the students were able to kind of shave off the filling. And
I remember her telling me about that.
Yes, make moon phases. So she really took to that, and I was really happy to see she scored even well on the national test as well, that all the students are, required to take. So that was awesome.
Awesome.
So now let's look at the scaled scores. So basically, scaled scores is it's a standard score. So basically, like if you were to go measure something in feet and inches, you would have to convert those to 1 unit, so it'd be easier to easier to total up. So basically, we converted those to scaled scores. So for this test, there's National Test of Achievement. Our scaled score is anywhere from the range of 200 to 800. So they are bigger numbers. And our average is 500. So, for example, Sophie scored, for listening, she scored in the 565 for her standards, or for her scaled score. So if we go back to our bell curve, we can see that 500 is average, and she's almost a half a mark above average. So she's doing really well in science, which, like we said, she's really enjoying it in class. So and listening. So she's a great listener in class. I love it, even in her talks.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Her good topics such as science and things like that. So
now, what would her scaled score for mathematics be?
Okay, yeah. So for mathematics, let's look at this. So we're going to go over here to the left, and we're going to go over to the right, and we're going to look at her scaled score. Mm-hmm. It says she scored a scaled score of 496. So like I said, 500 is average, so she's about 4 points underneath, but that's nothing to worry about. You can see these, they go by 100 points, and since she's only 4, she's right underneath average. So, and when I say average, I don't want you to take it as Sophie's as an average student. She's doing great in class. It just means that she's falling right in that middle range of all the students and how they're scoring and how we are early in the year so far. Gotcha. So we have lots more to improve on. So
that makes sense now.
Yeah, she's doing great with that. So do you have any more questions for the top section?
No, it all is a lot easier to read now.
Okay, awesome. Okay, perfect. So the next thing we're going to talk about is underneath, and we're going to talk about our criterion reference scores. So basically the criterion reference scores is there's no norm group. So we don't compare Sophie's scores to anybody else. It's just her scores, and we factor them in and how if she's either doing good or great in the areas and their sub-skills or a little bit lower. Okay. So basically it just takes the topics such as reading, comprehension, math, and then breaks them up into different skills. Okay. So these first two sections, RS and NP. RS means her raw score, so how many she got correct, and NP means number possible. So for example, under reading, she had there was 36 questions possible, and she got 26. So she missed 10 of the questions, which isn't bad. She was right in the average range for all students on that. Okay. So she was good. So for example, for structural analysis, she got 10 for 10 correct. So she was very high in that. So structural analysis just means endings such as ed, ing, s. So she's picked up on all of those concepts really well. So now she is struggling a little bit under phonetic analysis. She got 6 out of 11 correct. Phonetic analysis has to deal with endings or the tenses such as OU, OW, OS, anything like that. Those are kind of more difficult endings that they have to comprehend. And we've only touched on those just a little bit, so I think that did reflect a little bit in her scores. That's something we're going to be really touching on later, so we'll go back and do that. But she's a little bit low on that, but like I said, nothing to really worry about. I know Sophia will pick that up really well easily once we cover it again.
Perfect.
And then even to help you with this, I have some flashcards that I've made that have those endings that I can give you at the end of this meeting, and you can really practice with Sophie on those to help at home and really get her attention.
Perfect. I will definitely work with those.
Okay, yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. Okay, so next thing I really wanted to show you was her language. Her skills in the language are capitalization, punctuation, and sentence structures. Sophie scored extremely high on all of those. I was really happy with her. In her portfolio, I have we made sentence strips the other week, and Sophie started with her sentence. As you can see here, she started with her sentence with a capital letter and always ended in a punctuation, which was awesome. The kids really loved this because they got to hang them in the hallway, and all the kids got to go by and read their sentences, and she was happy to be able to show that off. So awesome. She did great with that. Okay, is there anything else under the criterion reference scores that you see a little bit areas? Or
everything makes sense. I'm just a little confused about social studies. Okay. It shows she only missed 1 or 2, but still scored in the low category.
Okay. Yeah, and I looked at that as well, and that is a good question. It shows that Sophie scored low, but she did only miss 1 or 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, social studies is a more difficult topic, which is why we kind of break them in up here. We do talk about those a lot more in the later grades, but I don't think there's enough information here to really portray how Sophie's doing.
Okay.
I know in class we've been talking about history and governments and all those lately, and specifically government and government branches and checks and balances and things like that. And she's really picked up on all that. She's very attentive in class and wanting to answer questions. And so I think she's really grasped that concept. So I wouldn't worry about this. Like I said, there's only 6 questions. So
okay, good. That makes me feel better.
She's been doing really well with that. So
is there anything else that you think Sophie needs a little extra work on at home?
Honestly, I think she's doing really great in class. As you can see, she's average to above average, and most of her concepts on here that we've been focusing on. As far as like extra work, maybe just really work on those flashcards that I'm going to give you at the end of today's meeting. I think that will really help her with her phonetic analysis and problem solving, like we looked at up here. She was a little bit low on that, but problem solving is a tough concept. There's lots of reading and word problems that we think of math and we think of just a couple numbers that we have to add together, and they're being tough for our 3rd graders nowadays. So, but that's something that we're going to talk about and really work on through the end of this year, and I think she'll be great with that. So I love having Sophie in my class. She's an awesome student. So
good. Well, she seems to really be taking to you as well.
Good. So. Awesome. I'm really glad. So like I said, if you have any more questions on this, please feel free to contact me. You can call me on my classroom phone number or email me, and I will be more than willing to help. Okay. And I also have this piece of paper for you here as well. And this paper just goes over a list of all the topics that we've talked about today and like the different, what RS and NP stands for. And just so you can go back and look at that if you ever forget or have any questions about that as well. So,
well, thank you.
Hopefully that'll help a little bit, and you should be set to go. And like I said, if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Merrill.
Thank you so much for meeting with me.
Good job.